Hello. How's it going? Yeah. All right, let's make it over, guys. Let's get that last drink. Gotta make it over. I don't want to start calling out names. You know I know half of you guys here. All right. Well, my name is Jimmy Mwangi, and I'm a Senior Technology Product Manager, and I support business development here at Tech Experience. So just a quick plug. After the session, come see me, or we've got a booth over there and that you can put in your submissions to innovate with us. Okay, so as we're coming in here, we thought we'd switch things up a little bit, and we've got trivia, and I also got prizes. But for you to win these prizes, you've got to be seated. So come on in. Okay. I'm going to start with the first one here. Okay, so how many users tapped into ChatGPT in the first 60 days? A, 580,000. B, 1 million. C, 15 million. D, 100 million. Who's got a razor? D it is. Wins a prize right over there. And for those of you online, welcome as well. Feel free to put in your answers over there in chat. I can't promise any prizes, but please participate as well. Okay, second question. Across industries, how many working hours can benefit from large language models? A, 22%. B, 40%. C, 73%. Or D, 86%. Was that a D or a B? Delta? All right, B it is. Okay, let's keep it going. All right, next one. What adoption essentials should enterprises consider when hoping to leverage the power of generative AI and foundation models? A, take a people-first approach. B, invest in sustainable tech foundation. C, lead with a business-driven mindset. Or D, all of the above? Wow, okay. Shayla, I don't know who you give this prize. I mean, it was just like, just pick somebody. Okay. All right. Just pick somebody. What percentage of global executives agree that AI foundation models will play an important role in the organization's strategies in the upcoming years? A, 19%. B, 43%. C, 72%. D, 98%. Yeah. Okay, Mark, I don't know, you probably saw these answers, Mark. All right, Mark got this. All right. All right, Mark got that one. Okay, which industry has the biggest potential to benefit from automation using AI? A, banking. B, health. C, travel. D, retail. I heard A, banking. All right, last one. How many generative AI models are there currently? A, 6, B, 19, C, 34, or D, 57? All right, C it is. 34. Right over here. All right, thanks everybody. Look at this. We got everybody seated. Just had to put some prizes. All right, so again, AI, hot topic. Clearly, we've got a full house today, so we're excited. Also want to note that if you haven't already, we've got a few demos here, great demos. So encourage you after the session, please visit the booths that we have. So special thank you to WePro, Headspin, TouchCast, Vapor.io, Palantir, and Supermicro. There you go again. I got to put a plug in again. Again, we've got a great makerspace here, so please innovate with us, collaborate. Let's talk right after the session. So with that, we're going to kick this off and with a quick sizzle.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome, welcome. Okay, let's give a round of applause for Jimmy. How fun was that? Fantastic job. And look at this, we have everybody in the seats, fantastic. Well, good afternoon, welcome to the 5G Hub speaker series on AI, ML, and wow, look at this audience. We broke a record today, pretty cool. Obviously, this is a topic of great interest, tons of excitement, and I think we can all agree it is all the buzz. We are seeing killer apps emerge leveraging generative AI, and in fact, ChatGPT has been called the iPhone moment of AI history. Generative AI is already creating professional art and videos, passing MBA exams at Wharton, helping people with dyslexia craft near-perfect emails. For the first time, the tech makes sense to everyone, everywhere, with its ability to mimic human dialogue and decision-making. And I mean, who hasn't tried it? It's pretty cool, right? And for the record, ChatGPT did not write my speech or any of the questions tonight, I promise. The opportunity with AI and ML is significant, especially when combined with the capacity, reach, and performance of 5G networks, along with the integration of cloud and edge computing. AI foundation models can provide enterprises the digital core for breakthrough innovation and competitive advantage, bringing increased value to productivity, unleash creativity, cost optimization, improved customer service, and so much more. There is a lot to talk about and so much to explore on this topic, so let's get things started. Please join me in welcoming our panelists out on stage. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon. Well, I was telling our panelists earlier that I think they brought the Taylor Swift effect tonight. What do you guys think? We're so excited to have you guys, and I'm going to start off with a few introductions, of course. So first we have Ross McWalter, Global Head of Telecom Applications at Amazon Web Services, formerly the Head of Big Data and Customer Experience Management at North America Ericsson. Ross is an expert in complex sales and business development. With more than 20 years of experience in the world of telecom, Ross now leads a successful team focused on helping communication service providers transform their business utilizing data, AI, and ML. Welcome, Ross. Thanks for joining. Next, we have Elena Firstman. Elena is Vice President and Head of Global AI Accelerator at Ericsson and has over 20 years of professional experience in computer science, AI, and cyber physical systems specializing in automation. She leads a multinational team at Ericsson, is a professor at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, and is a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. Elena is also a writer, speaker, and has co-authored more than 50 patents. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
All right, and next we have Aaron Hinkle. Aaron is the Director of Product and Solution Architecture at Vapor.io. His professional history has been grounded in the telecom industry, from systems architect to designing and deploying voice over LTE, Chrysler's connected vehicle, and Sprint's IoT core. With his expertise in network ecosystem and product management, Aaron is integral to Vapor.io developing the largest nationwide edge co-location and interconnection platform at the kinetic edge of wireless cellular networks. Wow. Welcome, Aaron. Thanks for joining. All right, and lastly there, we have Matt Sinclair. Matt is the Global Director of AI Sales and Strategy at Microsoft. He has years of expertise in IoT, AI, ML, and cloud technologies with a passion for creating value from emerging technologies. Specializing in cross-company strategies that capitalize on market opportunities through deep technical industry knowledge, Matt leads a global team that builds and executes Microsoft's commercial go-to-market plan for Azure AI. Welcome, Matt. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
All right, so I am going to start off asking our panelists here some questions, and then I'll turn it over to our audience, both in the room and online, so please get your questions ready. All right, to start things off, I want to ask each of you, as we talked about AI, ML, this is all the buzz. Why now? Why is it so transformative now? I mean, it's been around for decades. What makes it so significant at this time? Ross?
Yeah, so I think, we saw AI, ML come off the hype curve about 10 years or so ago. It kind of coincided with the availability of compute storage networking. Hyperscale availability of that was really the restriction. So that was the kind of inflection point. The technology for large language models has been around 4 or 5 years now. So starting with the attention is all you need paper, which really transformed the paradigm, if you like, to the transformer model. But then what we saw was a revolution in the user interface of the application into AI. So it allowed, the layman, the consumer population to tinker with AI in a way that they didn't before and get access to the technology which really drove the imagination of people in what the potential was to really build applications, automate, and just do fun, creative things. So certainly that seemed to, 6 months ago, a year ago, transform the interest in generative AI.
Absolutely. Thank you. Elena?
So I'd say that it's a new wave of hype or a new wave of kind of attention, because it's not just a pure hype. We've seen the popularity of decision support systems in 1960s, and they were performing pretty good, right? And then there were so much promises about AI, machine learning, and then the AI winter came, and then the breakthroughs like AI winning chess and game of Go, and when the technology reaches certain maturity so that the benefits are very clear to the broad population, such, for example, deep learning and NLP, we all accept that NLP is kind of being widely used with speech recognition and voice synthesis. So no one even calls it AI. It's just like normal thing, right? And then, I think the hype went down. We all got this acceptance, and then, probably the attempts of modeling the world were there for a while, but now with the advances in compute, with software architectures, with telecom networks, allow this for a very efficient execution, and now we see the new opportunities that are rising.
Excellent. Thank you. Aaron?
Barrier to entry. Ever since the Raspberry Pi came out and suddenly kids were able to start utilizing the AI and the ML and start seeing what was happening, it lowered the barrier to entry so everybody was able to start doing it. What we're starting to see now is the barrier to entry for enterprise. They're able to start getting into it cost effectively, and it's becoming simple and easy to utilize and implement without having to need a team of PhDs to get it up, get it running, and maintain it.
Building on what everyone else has said, I think the two main reasons for me why generative AI is so big at the moment, one is the AI itself. It takes instructions, it listens to us. You know, we no longer need to be a data scientist or a developer to get answers that we need from a model. Instead, we ask it in our natural language, and we can curate how it responds, and that responsiveness of the model is what makes it so compelling. The second thing is that point of interaction. One of the greatest innovations with the ChatGPT application is the application itself, not the model. The fact it's an easy-to-use UI, the fact it has memories of the conversation. And so this merger of the advancement in the generative AI technology coupled with the user experience is really what's kind of combined into this perfect storm of the generative AI moment that we're in.
Thank you, Matt. Maybe you can build upon giving some practical examples of where generative AI will have a significant impacts on business or society.
Yeah, cool. So one of the things we're seeing in enterprise, but extends into the consumer as well, is that advancement in productivity. So helping people do things better is sort of the main use case we're seeing for large language models and generative AI at the moment. So if I'm a customer accessing a website, you know, everyone's used a chatbot today and they're pretty lame and they don't really do what we need them to do. But with the power of generative AI, backed by large language models, backed by some of these new other capabilities like plugins, you're now actually having a personalized interaction with a e-commerce site. You're able to generate actions and do things in a way that doesn't rely on humans and allows you to do them in the way that you need. So I see that as one of the biggest applications of AI we see today from the consumer side. From the enterprise side, making sense of all this information and data that organizations have really is probably the #1 use case that we see around today. So if you're an organization, you can think about all the data sets, all the documents, all the information that's stored or you know, weaseled in certain parts of your organization, giving the model access to that so you can ask questions and then gain insights of it, so you're not spending a whole day doing research, but instead asking a simple question, having a conversation with your data. That's really enhancing productivity as well. So they're the two sort of areas that I see as common applications.
Excellent. Ross, I want to check with you. Do you agree? Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, my focus is broadly telecommunications, so we're thinking about kind of, I think, the way we think about it, there's kind of like table stakes type use cases that we see. A lot of those are text-based, text summarization, contact center, agent assist, you know, doing summaries for agents so that they can be more productive in other areas. But starting to look at more, let's say, challenging areas where we think generative AI can be complementary. So, for example, revenue assurance. So it costs telcos about 10% of their revenues in just leaking revenues. And that's because of the complex systems that you have across general ledger, invoicing, call detail records. There's multiple areas where you can actually get leakage. So we see that generative AI has the capability of taking these multiple heterogeneous data sources in multiple formats and bringing them together with a kind of consumable format that you can actually interrogate and get insights and correlations. So very quickly you can get insights in a way that you couldn't before. And then I think on the network side, it's really interesting when we start looking at the complexity of 5G, the multiple domains that you work in, whether that's core, RAN, IMS, the configuration side of things where you actually configure the network. How do you tie this all together so that you can provide a meaningful root cause analysis? So you know there's a problem in the network, you know there's an anomalous event. How do you bring all of this relevant information around configuration, troubleshooting together in a meaningful way to actually make suggestions on how you would remediate your network? Because I think mean time to detect is relatively easy. Mean time to repair, that metric is difficult to impact. So bringing that down impacts your customers in a positive way. So I think that's a super interesting area that we're investigating.
All right, now you said you could implement relatively quickly. Is that true? I mean, how How much of an investment, I guess, from a time and cost would it take to implement those solutions? And are they truly available today?
Yeah, so we're looking at, and we, when I say we, it's not collective we, it's AWS are looking at these kind of key use cases to implement proofs of concept in about 4 weeks. The benefit being, if you think about it, with foundation models, they're pre-trained models, so you're getting a lot of value out of the model, out of the box, if you like. So somebody's done a lot of the heavy lifting, the training of the model. So whether that's Amazon, whether that's Google, whether that's OpenAI, there's ways to very quickly leverage the value in those foundation models. And that can be with augmenting it with your own data. And the methodology generally we use there is called retrieval augmented generation, where you will actually use data that you have to actually essentially prompt that. So when you're using ChatGPT, you'll be like, write me a poem so I can tell somebody I love them. Then it's the same as that, but a little bit more complex. You'll actually send it technical information, tell it the format, tell it what you want. There's a whole science and an art behind prompt engineering. But leveraging that foundation model with your existing data, you can iterate and experiment very, very quickly. And we're seeing our customers do that very quickly as well.
Elena, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So we discussed internal efficiency. I would also lift R&D efficiency, like development efficiency as a first-class citizen here, because writing code and summarization, code body, and test case generation, that's an amazing tool, obviously, to help developers. And I would like to kind of emphasize the thing is that I think it's a symbiosis. I think that's like a collaborative work with humans, obviously, that we are looking at. And the third big area is actually the product itself. So an old example of generative AI, and that's not directly large language model based, but generative AI is in a broader sense, is, for example, antenna design that was, I think, kind of developed by NASA some years ago, when the antenna with best coverage had a very funny shape. It was like very strange shape, but it was absolutely the best coverage, which humans wouldn't create themselves, but it was like AI generated, which is super interesting. So I think like drawing that kind of parallels, if AI is so good nowadays of creating novel designs of architectures, now thinking of maybe buildings, maybe it will support us in creating novel software architectures and even network architectures. At Ericsson, we have this vision of cognitive network with all the domains in the network, radio access network and core network and transport and cloud. They are linked together, described in some fashion, and then they are AI-centric and they collaborate and self-adjust together. I think just being able to model it in a good way so that it's self-organizing and intelligent, I think there is a very big potential there.
That would be amazing. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit, too, when we think about integrating computing, whether it's cloud and edge computing, thinking about AI and 5G networks, the enhancements that brings?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two sides to this. Obviously, for me, edge compute, it stretches all the way from cloud to the telecom network, different parts of the telecom network, all the way to the device. And then AI is both consumer of this, because just imagine like when we have this large amounts of processing and you need to kind of, in the future when we need to consume this automatically generated video content, maybe we need to make sure that the networks are smart enough to be able to distribute these loads in a very good way so that we address the quality of experience for the consumers. And then obviously we can use AI for this distribution as well.
So, thank you.
So it's both consumer and creator in this case.
Excellent. Okay, so one of the questions that Jimmy was asking was one of the industries that will most benefit with AI, and I believe the correct answer was banking. Do you agree? And if not, what other industries do you see having some of the biggest value when we talk about AI? I'd like to take this one. Matt?
I'll start off with a very broad statement. I'm fortunate to be in a global role, so I get to see how industries are adopting AI in lots of different geographies. And it was really interesting seeing banking as the #1 use case, because I'm seeing a ton of people in banking want to have the conversation around ChatGPT and OpenAI, and then they go, so we're in a regulated industry, or PII. And so as much as I think there's value within that industry, there's two main blockers that we're seeing in most industries. One is the willingness of organizations to adopt the technology. So culturally, are they ready? And then if they're ready, the value that AI can bring is almost limitless. The regulated industry is definitely one of the biggest limitations, though. As part of that culture is if you've got these built-in things that you need to report on, it's a lot longer to implement things, make sure you do the checks and balances. The second thing we've seen is, to that culture point, is just aversity to the technology. Like education has been a really interesting sector, because you see some educational sectors, like in the Middle East, where they've actually been like all in. So they've built, ChatGPT-based educational bots that they've deployed to nearly all of their schools to help with after-school tutoring. Like they're just like, we're in, all about it. And then you've got schools like in my home country of Australia, where they're like, oh, no thanks, shut it down, lock it down, don't let anyone touch it. And so the industry conversation is interesting, because I don't know if you can pick one industry over the other, but I think it comes down to those two things: culture, and then that culture around regulation, and then that adversity to the technology, and whether they fear it or whether they embrace it.
Yeah, excellent points. Any other thoughts?
I think in terms of banking, a lot of that has to do of starting of how you're going to help the end consumer of the banking. If I can have an AI track and manage my account in terms of looking at, is there any strange patterns that are going on? What are optimal ways of doing my investment so I have a retirement account when I get to that age? If the AI can come in and help me in that area, I bypass a lot of the regulatory up front. And then what ends up happening, just like autonomous vehicles, you have to be comfortable with it. Everybody, once they've seen it and they've felt it and they've realized it, for the course of a couple, 3 years, okay, now you can take the next step into banking and moving in that direction. What else could be done? So a lot of this is not training the AI so much as training the humans and getting the humans ready for how the world's going to change and make their life easier and better for them.
Any other comments?
I would like to say that I was also a little bit surprised by banking. I think there is a big potential, but there are so many big potentials in other areas as well. It's a difficult question, but I think we can I think the way to answer the question is how unstructured is your data, or how structured is your data, the potential, and also the time horizon. So I can give you an example from Ericsson. We can apply AI in different parts of the portfolio, obviously, and there is like radio access network where there's a lot of structural data, and they're very fine-tuned heuristics and algorithms. There is an OSS domain where we have the run the operations and like all the kind of service management orchestration platforms, and then there's a network operations. And it's the operations that, if you kind of take a look at the whole amount of data or the whole amount of potential, it's the operations part that has the most amount of unstructured data, and that's exactly the part of the company that we addressed with AI first, because it was just easier. It was there. It was so much benefit. You could grab the benefits immediately, because like huge amounts of data coming in, and it's not structured, and there's huge potential. So you see the wins immediately. You could see like wins in like 2 weeks. And then the more in depth you go into the network, where it's already been fine-tuned, by the engineers, and it's this like procedures and support are already built in. It's difficult to see the benefits from day one, but I think long-term, the big benefits are there in this kind of products that can benefit of AI.
In some of these implementations that you're talking about, I guess what have been some of the biggest learnings or surprises as you started to implement these AI models?
Well, big surprises. I think one kind of interesting finding. I think like important thing to remember is like when some systems are so fine-tuned, as I say, like you put AI algorithm inside, and like I'm an AI believer. Obviously, I've been working with AI for so many years, and like we come to this fine-tuned telecom products and say like let's use AI instead, and from day one it may not perform at all. It's not even better. But you need to let it learn, right? So, and it's important to give it a chance to learn. So probably one needs to run two systems in parallel, one very fine-tuned rule-based, and the other one that lets you learn and improve over time. And over time, you will see the gains. So this is where all the MLOps story kicks in. And another, I think, interesting finding is like, once again, systems that have been developed throughout years and like rigid kind of rule-based algorithms are there, and it's performing really well. And you put this equipment in an environment that it hasn't seen before, and there are different weather conditions and so on. This is where we see AI making better performance. And obviously, I mean, we are discussing that now with the climate change, nothing is predictable anymore. Like we cannot predict it as well. So I think the big potential is where these kind of situations that haven't been seen before, and then the system will learn and adapt.
So a little bit of patience.
A little bit patience, yes.
Thank you. Any other learnings you guys want to share?
Yeah, I think there's lots. I think everybody's learning as we go through this. But what we've heard is that, I think to Matt's point, certainly the number one consideration is security of data. We see that as any enterprise wants to start experimenting with foundation models, they'll want to use their own data in some way or form. So they want to make sure that that data remains secure. It's generally obviously very sensitive information. So they never want that data to be used to train the base foundational model, if you like, or be moved into a place where it may be exposed. So, it's a difficult story, but I mean, for example, Samsung, that happened to them, right? So they had to reel things back in and really think about their security posture. So the conversations we're having, all of them include an attorney in some way or form. There's paranoia about what could potentially happen. So while the business sees the value in the technology and that they have to adopt it, the legal side of the house are like, this could go badly wrong if we don't fully understand what's going on here. And then it's things like the provenance of the data that's training the foundation models. If you don't know where the data is coming from, that ultimately is embedded in the model. And then you could get situations with like Twitter and Reddit that are now kind of disgruntled because their data was used in a commercial model, and anyone that consumes that model are they indemnified from those companies. So it's a very complicated web of interactions when you start bringing it all together within the enterprise anyway.
Okay, well, you started with this, so I think this is an excellent topic to dive into, is the risks. And how do we manage that, the data integrity and kind of that ethical perspective with this? Yeah,
so it is absolutely the first principle, certainly, that we think of, and it is the first thing that we engineer into our product. So the first thing we get asked is, can I use my data? Can I fine-tune this foundation model? Which means that you take a general purpose model and you train it for a task based on data that you provide to the model. And they'll want to know that that data will never leave, in our parlance, the VPC, virtual private cloud. It means it's secure within essentially your network. And then if I'm going to train this foundation model, are you going to copy that model into my VPC, and then I can actually train it locally so that I can basically wrap my arms around and make sure that it remains in my environment, and then can I host it there? So those are the kind of assurances that our customers are looking for to make sure that their data remains safe. So I'd say, it's conversations we're having with everyone, and we need to have very comprehensive, guardrails in place for that.
Absolutely.
What we've also found, though, when you start looking at the data security, is there's an actual data sovereignty is definitely an issue, especially with video feeds coming in, so on and so forth. But data proximity is raising its head a lot. We're seeing it obviously in Europe, but what we're seeing even in the US, the different states, different counties, different cities have a data proximity issue. The video, the AI, the raw data, whatever gets inferenced, whatever's training your model, has to stay in jurisdiction. So it's a data proximity in that regard. But when you apply it to the rules engine, because AI without affecting business and affecting affecting what's going on doesn't really, it's cool, but it doesn't really do much. The proximity becomes much more valuable then, because a lot of these businesses, you need to be able to make decisions fast. You need to stop a production line fast. You need to be able to stop a car because something's in the way fast. And if you have to go too far away, if you have to go across country, across region, it's too slow. You don't get it back to stop that car in time. You don't get it back to stop the production line in time. So not only is data sovereignty and keeping it secure and making sure only the right people do it in the right models, yes, that is true, but where matters as well.
Building on top of this conversation on the data and privacy and security, which is a very important conversation, the additional one that often ties in is the responsible AI aspect of it. So you mentioned ethics, and a lot of the time we spend with customers is educating on principles of responsible AI. If you're implementing these models, how do you put risk management processes in place? How do you put effectively unit testing in place to determine how this model is going to respond when you put it in the wild? And so we have a bunch of values that we document in terms of how to build those processes. But the main ones that I think about are transparency of the model. So when we're implementing these technologies, how do you have transparency around how a decision was made throughout each stage of the process? And this comes back to the regulatory industries, and why we are seeing some banking institutions now bringing this technology to life is because we're able to explain what's happening and put it in a way that's easy for regulators to read and understand. The second is accountability. So people often bring up, like the Bing experience. Who read those articles where Bing chat kind of went off the rails a little bit at the start, and we had to kind of rein it in? The reason why we reined it in and why we're now kind of releasing it in greater and greater capability is because we have a set of practices behind our accountability principles that means, okay, if something goes wrong, here's our action plan, here's how we implement, here's how we iterate, here's how we fix. And that's part of using this new technology, and creating those principles in an organization is super important. We have responsible AI as a core part of our product development, but organizations who consume this technology also need to have your own principles and your own processes to be able to mitigate, your AI applications. And so that's a really big part of the conversation. We talked before about how quick can you get this thing into a use case or into an application. I've seen days. I've seen days where people just grab it, put it in, and it's in production. Would I advise that? Maybe not. Maybe there's a few more checks and balances you need to do. But to actually put the technology in, we're finding is pretty quick. The time spent is on what's been highlighted here: data privacy, data security, and then that responsible AI component, and making sure you have a really comprehensive, practical, responsible AI process in your organization.
Wonderful, thank you. How do you influence those outside of your organization?
How do I do it, or how do the customers do it? So step one, have the conversation. It's remarkable how many CEO conversation, board level conversations you go in there, we want to put generative AI everywhere, in our apps, in the toilets, we want to put it everywhere. And then you go, cool, show me your responsible AI strategy. Show me where you've had the responsible AI conversation. They bring up a couple of notes where it's responsible AI, question mark. It's that's not going to do. You need to have, that conversation. Step one. What's the practices and principles and ethics and values of your organization? And how are you going to turn that into something that's a process or some sort of codified manner that you can ensure those values are applied to your decision-making process around responsible AI? So step one, have the conversation. Step two, make sure it aligns to your organization. Don't just grab random ones, apply them. And then step three, make sure you have some kind of processes where you review them. So, it was mentioned before that, legal is part of the conversation. Absolutely. Legal is part of the conversation. HR is part of the conversation. Finance is part of the conversation. So if you're looking to bring this into an organization, you need that cross-business input to align to what is the responsible AI strategy. And then that's how you then influence the rest of your organization. If it's just the CTO or the CIO kind of doing their thing, it's not really going to happen across the organization. You need that cross-business buy-in that's aligned to the company values.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so speaking of risks and concerns, because I know this question will probably come up from the audience, when we talk about productivity, do we all need to be worried about our jobs? What does this mean when we think about, again, the various industries and the workforce and the type of tasks and what AI is going to replace? What does that really mean to us?
I think that for most people, they think that, oh, their job's going to go away. But if you look over your course of your career, your job changes over time. As your knowledge base and your skill sets and your experience grows, your role in the organization grows. What AI is bringing to the picture, especially with the automation that's going to result of that, is that you're still going to evolve, you're still going to continue in your job. The job's going to change in a new way, in a different way. You're still going to have a job. Things don't ever really go away. It's just going to move slightly. But the reality of this is it's going to make you more productive. It's going to make you more intelligent about what you're doing. It's going to make you more effective in adding value to not only your own business, but your customer base. So in reality, this is a good thing. Now, does it come with some strings attached? Yes, it could go sideways very easily. But the reality is this is a good thing.
So I think it's interesting. If you think about it, Industrial Revolution was machines taking over physical labor to increase productivity. And now we're talking about computers taking over mental tasks to increase productivity. But if you think about it, Excel spreadsheets took over certain tasks that people did, but the outcome was that they exponentially increased the productivity of the people that needed to do those tasks. So I see this as being complementary in the same way, and tying it back to the same theory of like economics, it does say that as things become cheaper and more ubiquitous and become a commodity, which really inference is, machine learning models making decisions is inference, and it's become very, very cheap to do that. So it means that anything that's complementary to a commodity, of which ML really is at this point, it becomes a complement. So I think what that means is that humans are complementary to ML. You'll still need humans to make decisions, to validate. You know, we may have a very smart solution that, you know, detects an issue in your network and says, hey, I should make this change, but I'm pretty sure that Ulf is not going to let like a computer go out and say, I'm going to change your router configuration. So you'll need a human in the loop. So even now with Gen AI and all of the kind of things that are going on, we have capabilities to integrate human in the loop in all of these. And I think it's just an example of how, you know, higher level, high value activities are going to come out by being complemented by AI ultimately.
I'd say the amount of job is not decreasing, but the landscape of job is changing, and this pace of change is increasing. So, I mean, as you were saying, moving sideways, everyone needs to be prepared, and lifelong learning plays a very important role here. I think that's the mindset we need to have like everywhere, that jobs are changing. And to answer your question, Erin, if I'm worried about my job, well, I think about it daily, actually, that what do I need to change in my job to adjust for the future? So every day, but I also live with the mindset, I've been living with the mindset for a long time that I want to automate parts of my job that can be automated. So every day.
Absolutely, great points.
I won't belabor the answer because I think I'm agreeing with everyone. It's definitely displacement of jobs and reskilling is the area we should be discussing. It's not easy. You know, we spoke about autonomous vehicles in a couple of forums, and people saying, oh, we just get the truck drivers to learn how to drive remotely, or we teach them how to code. Truck drivers have been driving trucks for 20, 30 years. It's hard to reskill. It's difficult. And so that conversation needs to happen now. So as much as there's empowerment with the technology and we're excited about the use cases, the reskilling and displacement of jobs is important. Net equilibrium, I think it's going to generate more jobs. And there's actually a wonderful article, if anyone wants to read. It's called The Day the Horse Lost Its Job. And it's about the replacement of horse-drawn fire engines in New York. And it contrasts that moment to now, and remarkably similar of the news articles and the conversations that were happening. So if you want to dive into it, it's a wonderful article.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I have one follow-up question, and then I am going to turn it over to the audience if you guys want to get your questions ready. So this is actually a question that came in. I think it's perfect timing. What are the key skills and competencies required for professionals to excel in AI and ML? So I guess besides recruiting new talent, what can we do to strengthen our skills in this?
There's two different aspects in the kind of skills you need. You could be the data scientist to figure out how to optimize these models, how to train them, how to adapt them where it needs to go forward. There's going to always be a use for that. But there's a second skill set. And how do we apply those models into the business? And how do we leverage them? How do we support them? How do we get the everyday business? There's going to be two parts of that. Being able to leverage AI to solve a problem doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an AI expert. It realizes how do you implement that tool to make the business work better.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the key inhibitor to democratizing AI and ML across your organization is people. Because there's not enough data scientists, not everybody is a data scientist. So there's been a lot of work done to make ML accessible to the broader population. So that means providing kind of GUI-based no-code, low-code type applications where really anybody can build models, so churn models, propensity models. You can do that today, but to that point, you need to understand what you're building and why you're building it, even if you're kind of abstracting away the complexity of the build, train, deploy cycle of an ML model. So I think with the right tooling, anyone can really adopt and integrate ML into the organization, and it's just a matter of understanding what you're applying, what you're trying to achieve, and then measuring the outcome.
Thank you. All right, it sounds like we do have a question online. Jimmy?
Yes, we do. All right, so this is a question from Kurt. How can AI lower the entry barrier to the metaverse? Specifically looking at recently announced Vision Pro. How can AI help create content in spatial computing?
I can take a stab at this, and then the crew can jump in. So, well, generative AI and generating digital assets has been something that's been discussed since sort of the metaverse, was announced, I guess, a couple of years ago, or rebirthed a couple of years ago with Meta. So that's sort of the easy answer for me, generating those assets, generating those 3D models, creating the environment. We've seen demonstrations of support agents within the metaverse that helps you create the scenery, the environment, the conditions that's unique to your viewpoint. The things that people don't really talk about, or don't talk about enough, is that interaction in the metaverse. And so, the ability to translate across languages, that ability to have those conversations without those, clunky intermediary sort of machine learning models we've seen in the past, and that sort of natural point of interaction. I think there's a great deal of humanity that can be brought to the metaverse thanks to generative AI. So I guess the answer is still yet to be seen, but that's my perspective.
So here's a different perspective for it. My son, who's 13-year-old, and he's starting to do coding and doing a little bit of machine learning with language models now. And he's also doing Unreal Engine work. And it dawned on him 2 weeks ago, can I start programming in and create the environment of the Unreal Engine dynamically? Now, if you combine that with ChatGPT and it goes, I want a building, I want it to look like Corbusier, or I want it to look like Frank Lloyd Wright, I want it to be here as I create my virtual city, and I want to be able to create this in the metaverse dynamically on the fly based on what's interacting. Wow, that's going to be a pretty cool experience for kids. This is my 13-year-old son thinking this and where it's going. So is the metaverse going to be impacted? I hope so. And if we don't do it, my 13-year-old son will be on the leading edge getting it done if we don't do it ahead of him.
So the other side of story, I totally agree. Lower entry barriers and entry points for the community and developer community to build applications, low code, amazing. And the other side of story is that obviously the infrastructure needs to support it. So I think the 6G story. What is 6G about? Is 6G about this? All the new applications are like XR. XR is here. We've seen it. We've all tried it, but it's not massively adopted yet. To have massive adoption of XR will require completely different network architectures, and this needs to be in place. And AI plays an important role there.
Excellent. All right. First question in the room.
So when it comes to my coworkers, people that I know are using generative AI to help them become more efficient, obviously. Eventually, increasing by making them more efficient, that will be baked into assumptions on time usage and so on. So they're just going to have an increased workload. That's eventually where we're going. Excel, for instance, your great example. Now I don't have to write everything out. It's all done for me. So what specifically in Ross's and Matt's case, what targeted initiatives or strategies are your organizations using to develop AI skills for your workforce,
Sure. Is this working? So you mean in my case, Amazon's workforce?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. So fundamentally, we've been doing this for a long time. We have a process called OP1, Operational Process 1, where we plan our business for the year, and then we kind of validate it in OP2 towards the end of the year. And we've asked a question in there, how are you integrating AI into your business? Which areas are you integrating it? What is the benefit? What are the outcomes? So we've had people thinking about how they are integrating AI into the business. So this is not us, helping end customers. This is within our business, how are we doing that? So we've been thinking about that for a long time, and we've made available training within the organization, AI university type stuff, which we actually now, the same training we use for our internal engineers, we now share externally for the likes of yourself. You could go and consume it for free. But it's been something we've been thinking about for a while. I think that question has been asked at Amazon for 15 or 20 years. Obviously, probably the implementation is somewhat different now, but so I think that's embedded in the culture ultimately, and it makes people think that way and how they can actually use the technology to your point, improve the productivity and the outcomes.
Right.
Very quickly to add on, so AI fluency is something that we talk about a lot internally, and so in a very similar manner, we have the academic side, the learning, take the courses, not only from the product view in terms of what the product features can do and how to have that conversation, but the responsible AI. So all of our field teams are actually required to do a responsible AI training to learn how to have that conversation. So you've got the technical and the responsible AI. The other thing we do quite extensively is that creativity side of things. And so, for example, almost every Microsoft employee can access the Azure subscription and get access to Azure OpenAI and play around with it. And then we have hackathons. And so accessibility and playing with the technology to learn is super important as well. So you don't just embed the skill sets and the academic knowledge, but you also have that ability to play and learn. And that's really what we find combines not only to help customers, but to spur internal innovation as well. And so we did that with my team, and we've got workflows that we're building out because we've all got access to it. And so, obviously there's data protections and things like that we put in place, but the ability to learn and break it and say, oh, I can't do this, but I can do that, helps us then build this culture of AI fluency. And so that's what we try and instill in other organizations as well, as if you don't want to use external applications, build your own and give people access to it and don't block it off, let them use it in a protected manner. And that's what builds that culture of innovation.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I would love to kind of know from each of you kind of what you're hearing, seeing, and trending across ethical implications with AI. I would love to kind of dig into that as far as your strategies, how you're approaching it, how you're handling it.
Yeah, I think it's, responsible AI is obviously a big topic. And I think that's a concern for everyone. So things that certainly we're doing, and I think other vendors in the generative AI space are doing are inherently building into the foundation models the ability to detect hate, inappropriate content, so that even if there was willful intent to actually do that, it's going to be hopefully effectively filtered out. So we do that in our foundation models. There's other vendors like Anthropic who their foundation model is called Claude, and they have implemented a concept called constitutional AI. So they actually have a constitution that they've implemented into the model that the model then adheres to. So, for example, we talk about there's lots of foundation models out there. Earlier, we think that the answer was like 36 different foundation models, which indicates you pick the right one for the job. So if you, let's say, wanted a model that you could be pretty sure that it's going to be safe to communicate with your customers and children or whatever the kind of target audience is, then you probably want to pick a model that you know has really been intentional about how they've built that model for that particular outcome. So I think that's a big focus area. And I'll just close by saying that, we know that humans try to abuse these things in creative ways. So, for example, in the Alexa Fire TV that we have, we are going to add a feature where you can ask the TV to put an image in the backdrop of the TV. You just speak to it and say, hey, I'd like an image of a castle. But we know that humans being humans, that they're just going to do stupid things, right? They're going to do really offensive stuff. So we're taking a lot of time to put guardrails around that so that for our customers, they can have an excellent customer experience and not have to worry about the kids coming in and kind of abusing it, right? So there's lots of things to think about in this area that we're thinking through. So.
Super. Oh, sorry. Did you want to go?
Yeah. If I may, you had a very cool example there with the castle. I like it. I mean, in AI for telecom networks that we are building, I cannot say directly very cool example why they need to behave ethically, the algorithms, but they do, because in the end it's about the consumer, and we need to make sure that we are not discriminating anyone at the network fair. So at Ericsson we have adopted European Commission's AI ethical principles. Some, I don't remember when they were born, but kind of when the principles were formed, some 8 years ago, I think. And those were guidelines to start with, and they kind of transformed into AI Act. And these, in essence, they are dictating that there needs to be transparency, explainability, human oversight, non-discrimination, non-bias in data, and so on. So there's the whole framework. Having said that, okay, AI is so many more technologies than just large language models, and every new technology needs to have I don't know, analogy with software. If you create a virus, then someone needs to create an antivirus. So for every new kind of technology, be it machine learning, then we need to have explainability for machine learning. If it's machine reasoning ontologies, we need to find explainability for machine reasoning. And each of these new technologies now with generative AI, we need to find technologies for explainability for that as well. And that kind of all these tools are being formed in one framework that we have an internal certification body in essence. But I think standards and regulations play a very important role, obviously.
A lot of what Vapor is focused on isn't necessarily the model itself or the part of it. We're not in that business. We're in the business of taking models that are there in products and trying to solve problems that our end customers have a need for. Like with the city of Las Vegas, they have fatalities on the streets. How do we apply computer vision models with a set of rules engines and orchestration to trigger stoplights, so on and so forth? So yes, it's important that we address the models, but there's when you're creating it and dealing with it online, but then there's the practical application of when using it. A lot of what Vapor is doing is let's solve real problems utilizing what we know is good and fits that ethical model to get out the door.
And then super quickly from my side, I love all the answers here. The one thing we have as well at Microsoft is we have an Office of Responsible AI that's an internal team that looks at not only the technical side of things for responsible AI and works with engineering on the practical implementations of how do you measure responsible AI, but also the ethical and societal implications as well, and trying to couple that and apply that lens to our technology. So for an example, our facial recognition services cannot be used in certain countries for certain use cases, etc. And we explicitly say on our site, you can't use it for this, and you have to apply to use them. And so we're constantly trying to review. Do we always have the right answer? I'm not sure, but we're constantly reviewing those to make sure that we're considering all angles of some of those ethical implications, and then not being afraid to put in those product limitations or be very transparent about how those technologies can be potentially abused. So yeah, that's my quick answer, but I can give you more details later.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Next question.
Hello, my name is Jeremy. I work at T-Mobile Marketing. Thank you, Aaron, for hosting. Thank you, panelists, for joining. And thank you, T-Mobile 5G Hub, for hosting such another great event. 1 in 5 Americans currently have a disability. 2 in 5 will have a disability at the age over 65, which tells me in my gray hair I need to really be asking these questions, because AI hopefully can help me in my world soon. My question is, what use cases have you seen that AI has helped with accessibility? And I would think that probably varying companies have different levels of integration to AI accessibility. For those that have had challenges, how have you facilitated those conversations? How do you help create that level of prioritization and integration to make sure that when we think about innovation, those who need it the most are constantly prioritized?
I love that question. So I'm going to jump in first, because accessibility is very big for me. I have family members who have accessibility challenges, and so this is one of my favorite questions. Again, we're short on time. AI for accessibility, pop it into your favorite search engine, and there's some wonderful stories about how hardware is being designed to allow users to interact with Xbox, how vision services are being used to help vision challenged people create their wardrobe and choose what they wear in the morning. So sometimes they don't have to be completely transformational use cases on sort of face value, but when you dig in, empowering someone to make a decision or do something that we take for granted, for me, is where the most remarkable use cases are, and making people feel inclusive in that manner. And so at Microsoft, accessibility is probably secondary. Well, I wouldn't even say secondary. It's on par for like responsible AI and sustainability. There are 3 core pillars where everything we do is put through that lens. And so even with the products that we develop, are constantly looking at how inclusive can we make this, and not compromising on that as much as possible. Specifically in the realm of large language models, the ability to help people articulate themselves, or the ability to help people interact in ways where, if you have learning challenges, or you don't understand things the same as other people, being able to constantly ask questions and tune and get a different response, I'm seeing that as a really powerful output of generative AI as well. So anyway, I can rattle on for days on this. That's my short answer. I'll let everyone else jump in.
From my perspective, my answers would be probably AR. That's an amazing tool, enabler in the future. Haptics, robotics, that's what I've seen. And one of my personal favorite areas is brain-computer interfaces, where AI will play a very important role. Already today, things exist, right, that can read brain signals and even help restoring body function. So that's very, very cool and important research areas.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you, Erin, for hosting us. How can I trust any phone call / communication / media going forward?
Oh, I got a question for you. How could you trust it in the past? The AI doesn't necessarily change what was happening. We've had problems with this in the past. It just adds another dimension to it. I think a lot of this comes down to educating the people in terms of trusting. Don't assume what you're hearing and what you're seeing is factual. Go out and fact check it yourself and understand. And it's what we have to teach our kids. It's what we have to practice and learn ourselves.
So it's a great question. I think it's a big challenge, both in a couple of angles. So the technology is actually there to detect if a voice is human or synthetic. But you or I don't have that at our disposal currently. But in places like contact centers and where they want to mitigate fraud, we can actually do that. So we did have voice authentication, and then that kind of moved into the ability to actually detect whether somebody was synthetically generating the voice. The other big challenge, certainly in telco, is around SIM swap fraud, where you get somebody calling in to try and say, replace my SIM card, and then how do you authenticate them? And the previous way to do it would be, so for example, in African countries, there's a mandate now to actually have identity verification, and you'll take a selfie, and then you'll take a photo of your ID, and then you'll send that in, and then we'll use AI to validate your selfie versus your ID, and then we'll extract the text, and we'll validate that's you. But now with kind of spoofing, you can kind of spoof that as well, so people can generate the image of themselves. So now we have a concept called liveness, where you don't just look for an image, but you actually look for a movement and a motion capture of the individual, and then you validate that against the ID. So I think it's one of these things where technology is now trying to catch up with technology, so that you can actually mitigate some of these challenges. But it's a problem for consumers, yeah, for sure.
Well, one thing to quickly add as a yes and to this is there's a big area of research at the moment, cryptographic watermarking, where it's how do you effectively watermark what's produced by a large language model or some sort of synthesis engine. Now, there are pros and cons to that. Obviously, people don't have to adhere to it, but the way I've heard it explained to me is think of a web browser and the little lock that went on there so it's a secure connection. How do we institute things like that for AI-generated capabilities? So although not a perfect answer, to the point there are technological advancements that are coming right around the corner to help us kind of tag these things and capture them, but it is going to be an interesting world in the next couple of years.
I love this question. Thank you for the question, because it kind of, I said it before when, Aaron, you were asking what part of your work would you like to, are you worried about some parts of my work? So as much as I love panels with questions that you haven't heard before, because you're becoming very creative and it's great to be here, I don't enjoy doing presentations on stage that are like pre-rehearsed and everything. And so like, this is a waste of time, because I could actually model my face. There are tools like Synthesia. I can submit my green screen thing, and I can model my voice perfectly. So if I've written my script, let my avatar talk to me and it will look like me. That's amazing. So back to your question, when you have a voice call, can we trust a voice call on anything? I think the role of actually, carriers, operators is very important here, and roles of actually regulations is very important here, because when you submit a piece of text, already now you have to certify. I've written it myself. I haven't generated it. Like conferences, they don't want to have submissions. Publishers, they don't want to have too many AI-generated submissions or like fake submissions. So it's about trust. It's about certifying it, right? So it's in the same way. There has to be certification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Keith Peck. I teach at a local high school, and so my question is more around students and teachers. What are some things that students and teachers should be doing now to prepare their students for their future?
Shen.
I can jump on that first, because it kind of ties into some of the stuff I've said before. We've been, not so much classrooms, but with educational bodies, government institutions and education, etc., in inviting the technology into the classroom and exploring with the students has actually proved very valuable. And that's where, I shared the example before of, one of the Middle Eastern countries, the Ministry of Education started off by testing it with students. Like, here's a sample, play around with it. What can it do? What can it not do? How do you learn the limitations? I was sharing before, to go on a slight tangent, the story of that was in the New York Times about the lawyer that submitted a case briefing and it completely fabricated all the citations. And the judge was like, but how did you verify? And he goes, I checked with ChatGPT. I asked it, are these citations real? And ChatGPT said yes. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology, right? He just used the model and got outdated data and all sorts of stuff. So bringing it into the classroom, exploring the limitations and learning with the students I found to be really, really valuable. And just like, I think Excel and the calculator was mentioned before, that's really the space we're in now. How do you use this to advance your learning, to advance your output, to become better as a student, as opposed to don't touch it, stay away from it, it's dangerous. Yeah, that's sort of not a good way to go. So embracing it is the main thing.
One of the pieces that I've seen with my son in his schools, he's had a design course the whole year. And what they start off in the fall is the UN has a certain set of goals that they want to do, problems to solve. And each of the kids, they have to get together in a group of 3, and they have to pick a problem they want to solve and then figure out okay, here's a category I want to do, here's a problem I want to solve. Now with that, then they have to ideate around, well, how do I want to solve it? What's the technology I want to do? Do I create a maker piece of it? There's electronic piece. Add to that, there's going to be an AI piece as well. But what I found with my son is it has to be orientated to, here's my problem, here's what I'm going to solve. Now, here are the tool sets that need to be included with it. And then the kids are amazing. They go through and figure it out, but they need to have a target. They need to have something to go for and something that makes a valid sense to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you either, embrace it, like was mentioned, or you have to police it, and that becomes a fairly heavyweight task, which will consume a lot of somebody's time. So, I mean, if you think about it, when word processors came out, and then, Word, and it auto spell checked, so kind of why are you doing spell tests in the school when the thing will automatically correct your spelling and your grammar? So I think it comes down to kind of what was said before. How does this augment your learning? Because, for example, if you took a foundation model and you wanted to learn a concept or a first principle, you could ask it to structure it and explain it in a way that would help you actually learn it and retain it. So, there's ways of learning that are better than some ways. Like, for example, we know that writing things down is got more retention than just reading something, for example. So I've seen very interesting ways that you can actually prompt engineer to have a certain topic and use the foundation model, large language model, to help you learn more quickly. And again, I think that's almost a productivity play when you're helping your kids to learn and think in ways that are actually better, because the mental models that we establish in life, there's good ones, there's better ones, and there's just better ways of doing things that people just don't leverage in life. And I think there's an opportunity there.
Thank you. Next question.
Having us. My question is to Ross. On the infrastructure side, I heard a lot about the LLM sizes that will define the success of the model, right? We are hearing that some LLMs have more than 40 billion parameters. But what we are doing from infrastructure size to make it affordable, to make it accessible, to make it powerful, so enterprise can deploy LLMs without paying large amount of money.
Yeah, I feel like you asked that question specifically for me to answer it, but I'm joking. I'm joking with you. Of course, you wouldn't do that. It's an interesting question, because the traditional ML, let's call it that way, was you could train a model, you could deploy it on on your laptop or whatever. You could deploy it at the edge. There was no problem. Now with large language models, these are exponentially larger. So if I look in our model hub where we host our foundation models, the average instance that we recommend is 100 gig, almost a terabyte of memory, 100 CPUs, and 4 GPUs, let's say. So the problem is that you need to actually shard, a model across multiple instances to actually host it, which is a very different paradigm that we had before. So from that, you can infer that it's going to cost you a lot more. So you need to do it, the cost-benefit So what we, certainly at AWS, and I know other hyperscalers have done, is we've looked at the silicon and tried to look at ways where we can optimize that for hosting both inference and training. So we developed a chip called Trainium, it's the name, which compared to equivalent EC2 instances, so EC2 is our elastic compute, was about 50% cheaper to train an equivalent model. And that's just through optimization. And on the inference side, which is actually going to be the largest cost component, because once you actually put a model into production and use it, you'll be hitting that with lots of prompts. So ChatGPT was like $1 million a day just on inference, right? Because all the people using it. So we developed a chipset for that, which was 40% cheaper price performance versus the equivalent chipsets. What this broadly does as well, which I know is aligned with both T-Mobile and Amazon and Microsoft and Ericsson, Vapor, is sustainability goals. So these are cheaper because the power consumption is lower. So that means that you are contributing towards your ESG goals as well. So anyone that's adopting more performant silicon is helping the environment in some way or form also.
If I can just add one point to this. I don't know how we're on time. Is my mic working? No?
Oh, can we turn his mic up?
One thing we're finding is everyone assumes they need like a GPT-4 for all of their use cases, and it's like a sledgehammer. And everyone's like, GPT-4 for everything. No, definitely not. In fact, the architectural patterns we're seeing is these lighter weight LLMs where you can run them on much leaner silicon, you can run them on almost CPU, will be part of your architecture. And in fact, the intelligent use of how LLMs fit into your pattern, instead of just like sending everything to a GPT-4 and getting it back, how do you distribute that across the edge, across smaller LLMs? Since the Meta Llama was leaked, the kind of open source community has exploded with optimizing these models, and Databricks came out with their Dolly model, which can be trained, I think, what was it, like $15 or $30 with like an hour on just like a regular Spark cluster. Like, to me, we're all thinking of big models, trillion parameter models, because that's what's in front of us. But if you look forward 6 to 12 months, how you intelligently architect lightweight LLMs that don't require billions of parameters can take an hour to train. That's kind of direction that we need to go. But that's still nascent in terms of the thinking and the patterns because of how accessible the technology is. So I agree that optimizing on infrastructure and optimizing on chipsets, these innovations are absolutely needed. But then also thinking about intelligently architecting, not just trying to solve the hardware problem, is also key.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have time for one more in the room, and then we do have one more online as well. Please.
Hi, panel. Thanks for the great talk. I'm Akib. I'm a graduate student at UW in technology innovation. And something that I started thinking about was the human-in-the-loop element, in that all of the applications that we talked about, there is a human in the loop, such as someone verifying that what the LLM produced was correct. But as we deploy all of these AI models in, for example, deep space or deep sea, where maybe there are latency problems, how do you think the future of human in the loop is going to unfold with these latency bottlenecks? Thanks.
I personally don't believe in the need of human in the loop in all use cases. So hopefully we will have lots of use cases without human in the loop, just simply because I can give an example. You have deep sea as an example, but even in healthcare scenarios, when AI comes with a proposal, and then today, actually, doctors need to sign off on the decision, and that's sometimes ridiculous because they cannot backtrack the decision. So it's just a sign off, just to have someone responsible for that. I think we're going back to this regulatory and certification of the correctness, because, and you were talking about guardrailing as well. It needs to be guardrail. If you're using AI, we need to ensure that there is a safe exploration, and while it's acting within the borders, then we should be able to trust it.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
All right, Jimmy, last question.
All right, last question comes from Dan Mo. How do AI ML models explain the recommendations/decisions they come up with, since these models have sophisticated deep learning logic built in humans may not understand?
So I can take a stab at that. So it depends. So again, if we talk about traditional ML, so things like churn propensity, where you would use a classification model. So in those scenarios, there's a concept called explainability. So if the model makes a prediction, you can actually see why it's making that prediction. So which features in the data are actually driving that prediction. You can also detect things like bias, for example. So, if it's a human population type prediction, is there too much male versus female or some other imbalance in it? So those are generally available in any kind of integrated development environment for machine learning. I think with generative AI, it gets a little bit more difficult. So certainly lots of the proprietary models won't expose any of the weights or the biases in the model, because that's the kind of secret sauce in how they operate, right? Some of the open source public models will give you access to the weights and biases, so you can actually see how they change when you actually fine-tune the model, let's say. But it's not really telling you why it made it generated a certain output in that context, right? And then there's no quality metric really that's fully established there on the response either. So it's very subjective, and it's not very quantitative in looking at large language models currently, I don't think.
I'll maybe add to that, because it is an area of exploration. The traditional explainability tool sets do not easily translate across to large language models due to the number of parameters. I mean, understanding the weights and biases don't necessarily help you explain the model, but at least helps you kind of see what's going on. Something that is being explored at the moment is just asking the model, how did you come up with the answer? And it's actually remarkably good at telling you kind of the chain of thought it went through. Now, that then opens up other doors around, is the model distrustful? And then that's a whole area called alignment that we're not going to go to. But what I think is so interesting about this space is that, well, our traditional explainability tools don't work. And so there's actually this whole area of exploration where people are crafting these different methods, including just asking the model. And so this is where I'm going to come back to the responsible AI principles as well. So obviously having tangible technologies and processes to statistically measure is important, but then also having those processes around capturing things when it goes wrong, testing beforehand, making sure you have the conversation are critically important. So don't be the person that deploys a model in production in 3 days. Make sure you have the conversation cross industry so that you understand the potential risks. And the question before around human in the loop was a really good one. It comes down to risk tolerance. What is the value you get from deploying this, and what are the potential adverse effects? And are you willing to take on that risk, just like any other new technologies? That's kind of the conversation we like to have.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that is a wrap. So let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you. And our audience, great questions. But good news, don't worry, we have another session next month, July 18th. The topic is Web3, so please go to Tech Experience and register. And we do have one more surprise for this evening. I'm sorry, it's not Taylor Swift, but it's almost as cool. The 5G Hub turns 1 today, which is awesome. So exactly 1 year ago tonight, we opened our doors and invited everybody to come in and to innovate with us, to leverage the latest in 5G technologies, to start growing this ecosystem. It's been an incredible year, and we have a little video to celebrate. So let's go ahead and kick off the video.
I could not think of a better place to be right now than to be at the 5G Hub.
Having a community like this, a space like this, breaks those barriers.
The network is here. The infrastructure is here. The people are here.
If you want to come and experience one of the world's best 5G networks, it's right here.
Having a center of excellence like this, it's really critical to us building our own roadmap.
To see the technology is there, it's capable, it's possible. It was eye-opening, very exciting.
But we never had this type of environment that we can show the real use case.
Dell and T-Mobile have actually partnered to do a trial and do a POC of real applications that are customer-driven, that are solving real pain points.
And then, of course, you have the 5G hub here, where that started to build more capabilities in our lab environment to enable those engagements to happen more fluidly.
There's the maker space, every network under the sun you can think of, so you can simulate any type of data environment you want here.
The ability to work with other people that may be in a similar field and bounce ideas off each other, it's great.
I think you all understand why. It's not that this is just a cool place, but the opportunities we have together to build something meaningful.
All right, love that. Okay, so perfect to celebrate with everybody here this evening. We have plenty of cake, and of course, we have more time for networking to explore the amazing demos there along the back. So thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.